Hi guys, and welcome to BitKnits. Today I'm going to show you how to do this really cool boho puff stitch bracelet. It's just made with a bunch of puff stitch rows, a little loop on one end, and then we sew a button onto the other end, and it makes a really cool boho style bracelet. I made this gray one using a like a 3-weight yarn. I think it was a Hobby Lobby brand yarn. I think it was. I love this yarn. This pink one I made using scrap yarn, and I have no idea what brand it is. It looks like it was probably a 2-weight, and I just put a little pink mushroom on the end for the button, and then a smaller hoop up here since this was a smaller button. I used a 4mm crochet hook for this project, and the one that I'm going to make today I'm using, again, it's a Hobby Lobby brand. I love this yarn. That's the brand, and it's a sport weight, really soft yarn. I really like how this one turned out. I like the texture of it. I liked how it felt, so I'm going to make another one in this red color. Alright, so all you'll need is a crochet hook, some scrap yarn. Any size will work. The bigger the yarn weight and the bigger hook you use, the bigger lengthwise or widthwise your bracelet will be to start, and then you may find you have to adjust your length depending on how fast it grows, because these puff stitches grow pretty fast. So it is a super quick, super easy project. Once you have everything together, we'll get started. Okay, to start the boho bracelet, we're going to make a slip knot on our hook, just like that. Pull it tight, and then we're going to chain 9. So we have 9 chains. We're going to single crochet into the second chain from the hook, so skip this first chain, single crochet into that second chain from the hook, and do a single crochet all the way back. So you should have 8 single crochets at the end of this row. Okay, so it should look something like that. Alright, next we're going to start the first row of our puff stitch rows. So you're going to chain 1, you're going to turn, so just turn your work, flip it over, so you're looking at this side. Now we're going to do our puff stitches, and a puff stitch is just yarn over, put your hook into the first stitch, draw up a loop. Now you have 3 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over, put your hook back into that same stitch, draw up a loop. Now you have 5 loops on your hook. Yarn over, put your hook in the same stitch, draw up a loop. Now you should have 7 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over and pull back through all of those loops, and then chain 1 to secure, and that's a puff stitch. You're going to continue, you're going to skip the next stitch, do a puff stitch into that following stitch. So yarn over, skip that stitch, go into the next, drop a loop, yarn over, drop a loop, yarn over, drop a loop, 7 hooks or 7 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull back through all 7. And chain 1 to secure. Skip a stitch, work a puff into the next stitch, yarn over, draw back through all loops on your hook, chain 1 to secure, skip a stitch, puff into the next, chain 1 to secure, and then you're going to put a single crochet into the last stitch of that row. And there you've started your puff stitches. For the next row, we're going to chain 1, turn, and you're going to do a puff stitch into this space right before your first puff stitch on the row below. Chain 1 to secure, and then we're going to go into this big space here for our neck. So we're essentially skipping the stitches that are created by each puff stitch. We're going to go in the middle. So yarn over, go in the middle in between the 2 puff stitches from the row below, do a puff stitch. Chain 1 to secure, skip that puff stitch, go into the space in between the next 2 puff stitches and do a puff stitch. The next one, chain 1, and then what you're going to do at the end is put a single crochet into the top of the last stitch of that row. And there you go. Chain 1, turn, and work the same pattern in between each puff stitch. You're going to put a puff stitch. Chain 1 at the end of each row, and keep going until the length is, you measure around your wrist until you're happy with the length, and I'll meet you there. And just remember to keep your puff stitches really loose. So when you're going through and pulling up these loops, keep them loose. The looser they are as you're drawing them up, the easier it will be when you yarn over and pull back through all of them. Certain yarns are definitely easier to work with than others. This one is fairly easy as long as I keep my stitches loose when I'm making the puffs. And you should have 4 puffs in each row going across. And that's how you know you're on track. So if you have to stop every once in a while and just make sure you've got puff, 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 4 puffs. And that's how we count up as well. So we'll go diagonally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then I've just finished my 10th row. And you can, every once in a while, you can kind of measure it on your wrist, or if you're making it for somebody, measure their wrist and then measure this as you're working so you know when to stop. You want to stop when your length is when it barely touches, so I've still got a little ways to go here. You want these two ends to barely touch. You don't want it too tight and you definitely don't want it too loose. So work a few more rows and I will meet back up with you at the end once I get a few more rows on here and my length is where I need it to be. So once you've worked your last row of puff stitches and you've measured and you're happy with the length, mine are usually about 6 inches, 6.5 inches. This one is almost 6.5 inches. So I'm happy with it. We're going to put on our last 2 rows. So we're going to chain 1 and then we're going to turn. We're going to single crochet into all the stitches back, and you should have 8 single crochet stitches. So you want to skip this first one that it's part of your chain 1. You're going to go into the next one and you're just going to single crochet and then the next. And then the last one is the top of that last puff stitch. Alright, so now we've kind of mimicked what we did here when we did a single crochet row before we started our puff stitching. For our final row, we're going to create the little loop that will fit over our button. So we're going to chain 1, turn our work, and we're going to slip stitch into the next 3, just like that. You're just going to put your hook in and slip stitch to the next 3. So you should have 3 slip stitches. And now here we're going to start chaining. So I'm going to chain 3 because I know that my button isn't very big, the button that I have. Now for the gray bracelet that I made, I chained 5. So I did chain a bit more just so I knew it would get around that button. For this one, it's a smaller button. I'm only going to chain 3 because I don't want that space to be too big. Skip a stitch, slip stitch into the last 3 stitches on that row. Make sure you get under both loops of the stitch and then yarn over, pull up a loop to fasten off, cut your yarn, and you've got your bracelet just about done. So I'm going to go ahead and weave in these ends. If you have a long enough tail here at this end, you can slip stitch down or weave this in using a needle, and then you can start to sew your button on. My length here is not long enough, so I am just going to sew the button on separately as soon as I weave my ends in, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. Okay, so I have woven in all of my ends. I have my button here. I'm going to turn this how I want it and make sure I know where to place my button. You can always try it on and see where you want your button. You can use a pin or even a stitch marker so you know where about you want your button. I'm just gonna eyeball it and see how it goes. So I'm gonna put my button probably right in the middle here, maybe in the second row. So I'm gonna come up in the middle of this puff stitch with some yarn, and I'm just using the same yarn as the bracelet. And then I'm going to put my needle in the back through the button loop. And if you have a button like this, you would just come in from the back and go up through the little buttonholes in the middle of the button. You just have to make sure that you have a small enough needle. The head of this needle has to be able to pass through whatever loop or hole of the button has. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through there. And this part, you just kind of have to play with it. I want to get some it's almost like you're weaving in your ends here, and you just want to get enough so it holds the button in place, and then you can kind of turn it and set it the way you want. And then we're going to go back through some more of the loops of one of the puff stitches and try to get into, I don't want to go where I came out of, and go back through the buttonhole and just pull your yarn through and pull it tight and go through this puff stitch and come through the other side of the buttonhole, and then just do that a few times to secure it, as many times as you feel is necessary. And once you're done, you can cut your yarn. Work with a smaller tail, and you can weave in. Sometimes I like to go up through that one. But you just weave it in just like a normal tail. If you want, you can tie a knot in the back here. I've got the two strands. Some people like to tie knots just to give it the added security, safety of maybe not pulling out so easily. I'm just going to weave these in really quick, and then we'll have our bracelet. So now we have 3 boho puff bracelets. You can see the nice puff stitching. They look super cool. I just love them, and they work up super fast. It's a great scrap project. These simple little puff stitch bracelets. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. And check out some of my other videos. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye!